And we're live.
Hey, I'm Dr. Terry Wager, Generator Coaching Consulting, and I'm here with...
My name is Kevin, and I am co-owner of Precision Design and Build.
And what are we talking about today, Kevin?
Well, today we're going to answer another question here regarding partnerships and what to avoid in them, and just discussing the overall atmosphere of what it's like to be in one. So I see here, so this question is from Elena W. So she goes, I'm equal partners in my business with someone I've known for literally decades. In the beginning, it felt like a match made in heaven. Over the past couple of years, though, I've been doing more and more of the operational work while my partner steps back and lets things happen. How do I address this?
Wow, that's a big one. I actually am in a partnership with Generator Coaching, and I know you're in a partnership. What's your take on it?
Fire them. No, I'm just kidding.
Just get rid of, fire them straight away. They're 50%.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
It's only a little lawsuit, so it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, that's fine. It's whatever.
And best friends forever.
Yeah,
get rid of them.
I think with partnerships, there's a lot of perspective to be had in them. And I think, for one, a lot of times people think a good partner means bringing on somebody that has the same skill set and has the same responsibilities as yourself. And that's kind of where I think our friend Elena here is, her perspective stemming from is, well, why aren't my partners doing the same thing I am? And I think that's a big misnomer that people make, is that partners should be having the same responsibility. Because ultimately, if you have two people doing the same thing, one of them's not needed, as a general rule of thumb in partnerships that I've found. And so, but at the same time, I think what happens is, because if you have the right partnership, I think what can happen is that, because you don't understand their role as well, or they may not understand yours, there can be a disconnect in regarding, how much time is put in, what's required of that person, what are the results supposed to look like. And there's a bit of an ignorance on both sides to the other person of, because Elena here is complaining, but maybe her partner might feel the same way with her,
Right. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I would ask Elena, what does your partner think, or have you actually talked to your partner yet?
Right.
One of the things I think about with what you're talking about is, and you said maybe you have similar, or people think they should have similar. And at the same time, a lot of people think that a good partnership is we have completely different abilities. And so I don't have those abilities, so I have my partner doing them. And maybe Elena's, and
Right.
This is just a guess, I could be wrong, but Elena might think that, well, this operations thing isn't mine. It was supposed to be theirs, and they're good at it and I'm not. So why not? Why am I doing it now? And the reality is, for me, when I hear that, or I hear this question, is how much communication are you having with your partners? And how much have you guys discussed the roles, and what is going with the partner that they're backing up? Are they not agreeing and don't know how to confront it? Are they feeling like they're marginalized and so they're moving back? I'm actually working with a company right now that last year, the majority owner of a company actually stepped back because he felt like whenever he had an idea or he had something going on in the company and brought it to them, he was set aside. And so he started moving back and actually stepped out of the business altogether in his mind. And then at the same time, everybody else said, well, no, he stepped out as far as roles goes, but he was still involved and talking to the different people. And he wasn't talking to the other owners. And so it's like, what's going on here? And I think a big reality for all of us is every one of us have a different perspective on what the same situation is bringing to them. And so we really got to get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on with that. It's not a
Right.
answer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. With partnerships, it's a delicate balance. Me and Terry were actually talking earlier about, communicating a lot is like a dance, and meaning, you can be too direct, not direct enough, or there's different resolutions for different situations, and I think that's very applicable, like with partnerships. Um, like depending on the situation, I don't know. It's tough. Yeah, I don't know, Terry. You take it from here. I'm getting brain fog.
No brain fog yet. We have at least 25 minutes. And the interesting thing is when we were talking earlier, we were talking about that magic that I have of how I can actually confront somebody either through a story that is very similar, or I go direct, or sometimes I even uh, joke about a situation and I poke a little bit to
Right.
see where they're at. And what I'm really doing when I'm doing that is to see how vulnerable they can be, at the same time how protected they are. Is this something that they're ready to talk about, or do we need to have a different strategy? And the years and years of working with people and confronting, I worked with highly aggressive inmates, and I worked with severely emotionally disturbed kids, and then I worked with severely emotionally disturbed adults that are in marriages, and that's a joke. But I've worked with all kinds of different people, and one of the big things I learned is that we all have different temperaments, and maybe at this moment I can get in and get into the vulnerability of a person and talk to them and they're okay, but 1 minute later they're protected, and it's because we have emotions going off constantly, and they're always triggered at some, we're always waiting to be attacked in some way. That's a human condition, is waiting for danger. And so, where is this person at, and how open are they to the communication? And for most of us, we get into patterns of avoidance, and we get into patterns of, this is how I deal with everything. And Elena's question that we were talking about a few minutes ago is, I think that there's a pattern that happened, and one person is running away and the other person is taking over. And it's a very, very similar pattern in any relationship, is one is the pursuer and one is the runner. And what we got to look at is, why is the person moving back, but why is the other person pursuing?
Right.
And it sounds like somebody's actually using a jackhammer over where you are.
Oh, you get. Sorry, that's the company compressor.
Okay. We have a company compressor.
Surprise.
That's one new thing that I have to get in my company. I don't have a company compressor. But but it really is interesting when we start looking at what's going on in the relationship, and uh, often it's hard to approach people, and
Right.
it's hard to know how to approach people, especially if they've got years and years of a relationship. And when I hear years and years of a relationship, I hear years and years of a pattern. And so I'd be really interested to kind of understand a little bit more about that pattern.
Right. Yeah, understanding the dynamic. I think another piece of the puzzle too, that a lot of folks tend to walk over, is setting the right expectations when going into a partnership with somebody.
Absolutely.
Being very as definitive as you can about what your role is going to be, how much time is going to be required from your role, trying to get as clear as possible. You're not going to have all the answers, and things can change, especially in a startup, for sure. But I think being as open as possible up front can solve a lot of the issues, because it sounds like with Elena here, um, if so, based on what she's saying, I'm assuming the conversation hasn't been had properly between her partner, uh, in regards to splitting the responsibilities, because it sounds like here she's saying she's doing more and more of the operational work while my partner steps back. So based on what she's saying there, I'm assuming their partnership was based on both of them being operators, both of them being responsible for fulfillment. And in doing so, they weren't being clear about whose tasks, who does what tasks,
Yeah.
or whose responsibilities are which is probably a better way to put it. 'Cause the
Right. No,
tasks,
and I like the way you're putting that. And one of the things that we did together, you and I, when we were working with your business, you, me,
right,
Vinny, and Tyler, um, you guys really did spend a lot of time, and we discussed why it's important to spend that time
right,
understanding what's most important right now, and what the roles are, and how we're going to best be serving our strategy, really,
right.
in what we're doing. And it came down to it. If we could talk about yours for a minute, is
Yeah,
like, you're really good out front and talking to people and have a mind for marketing. And so really understanding that you're that person that's going to go and do that, the sales piece, the marketing, and
right,
you and Vinny do a little bit of the sales together. But Vinny is really the operations, because he's been in the business for a really long time and understand how to
right,
actually put things together to make the money. And then Tyler is an amazing craftsman. And so really understanding where those roles are, and each of you has different areas of leadership to develop. And some of you are you've been working with me for a couple of years anyway. I
right,
don't know how long it's been, but you've really developed into that kind of higher level, and really been focusing on personal development, where some of the other people in your company haven't had that experience with that. And so
sure,
understanding where that is, and what we all personally have to develop, and what our roles are best, and how we can actually, we talked about one of your people. I won't say who it is. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but one of them was having this assumption that somebody knew exactly how to do stuff, because they said they know how to do it, but they don't know how to do it the precision way.
right,
And so what is my role as a leader is not just to believe that somebody knows how to do it, but actually model that behavior of how I have to do it. And then at the same time as modeling it, then after modeling it, being able to coach to the model. And that's a really big thing. And for me, with this particular question, I think that there hasn't been that discussion about how we're doing it, and are we coaching to the model of what we've decided together? Have we made a model?
right. And
And
I think too, like a good basis, like if you're starting a business, because I think a lot of people too, they'll get into partnerships for fun, just because, oh, they're my buddy, and I just want to, let's just have a business. Now, again, just some preface on precision, right? Like with me and Tyler were the original partners. Vinny came in at a later date. But like with me and Tyler, while we're buddies, our skills actually do complement one another,
absolutely.
right? He's handling fulfillment, and I'm handling scale. That was the overarching split. um I think a good foundation to kind of go off of when you're thinking about partnerships is, businesses have three overarching structures to them, right? You need leads coming in, you need leads to be closed, and then you need them fulfilled, right? So you have this loop of leads, sales, fulfillment. And so when you're thinking of a partnership, it's important, I think, to think about where does everybody fall into those roles? Because, like, for instance, with Elena, you know, from what it appears that her and her partner, I don't know if or no, she said she's equals partners. So there's two of them. So I'm assuming there's two of them. But nonetheless, this partner that she's speaking about, assuming that they're the only two, they're both responsible for fulfillment, right? So, and I'm assuming that was kind of what the thought was, in the construction world. I'm a carpenter, you're a carpenter. Let's make a business. And while that sounds good in theory, the leads still need to be, people still need to find out who you are, and sales still need to be closed, which both
Yes.
take time and energy. So
Yes.
I think keeping that in mind when you're deciding, deciding what responsibilities you want to have and deciding what responsibilities you want someone else to have and what qualities that looks like. I think that's a good foundation to kind of start from to avoid the situation that our friend Elena has found herself in.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And we actually have an assessment called the Working Genius that we use to really identify
Yes.
where you are strong in the different areas that you're strong in. And this isn't necessarily are you strong in operations versus are you strong in marketing, but it's really are you strong in wondering? Are you good with coming up with new and innovative ideas? Are you good? Are you really good at knowing when an idea is going to work or not just by looking at it?
Well, I would take it even a step further with this test. I really huge fan of it. It doesn't really tell you what you're good at per se. It tells you where you like to work, and by
That's a
default, you'll
good
likely be
distinction.
good
I
at it.
like that, and it's yeah, because you could be very, very good at marking things off a list, uh,
Right,
and it might drain you completely. Now,
drains your energy.
I would have to believe that if it drained you, you wouldn't be very good at it because it drains you before you can
Right,
actually build the skill. And for me, I'm not good at checking things off a list. I don't like to do it, and that's called tenacity. And I don't have a whole lot of tenacity, but I have a whole lot of galvanizing, and I have a whole lot of looking at something and knowing whether it's going to work or whether it's worth tweaking to make it work.
right,
And those are some of my superpowers, and I love doing it. Now, the problem is if I'm doing that after an idea is already being implemented, then we could have a problem. Um, and so we want to be careful. And like the wanderers of the world, I don't know if we have any on this call right now, but the
I wonder.
wanderers of the world often
Yeah,
get joy out of wondering. And so after an idea starts going and you get bored, you're like, well, I wonder if we could do it even better and start to rework the
right,
idea before, you know. And so it's really, you want to be careful in that too. And are we stepping on toes or are we getting in the way? But really, when I think about Alina's question is like, okay, you got two people that are partners in a business, and do you guys work from the same vision? Have you guys gone through? And I know we did this with you and with Tyler
right.
and Vinny
At
is
an early stage.
at a very early stage, and then we
Yeah,
re-looked at it last year, or when we started really getting down. When Vinny joined, is like, okay, let's revisit that, and is this still really what you're doing? And I think
right,
we even stepped up what you were going for um, as
right.
we looked at the vision, and then now how do we behave? And we've talked about that question before, and you know, a lot of companies talk about values, and we have these list of values that we wrote down, and they're on the wall, and we really value the values, but we have no idea how to act them out on a daily basis.
Right.
And so what we talk about at Generator is not necessarily values like I value integrity or whatever, and we do. I mean, we like integrity, we like honesty. Those are good things, but what are the behaviors that you value, and
Right.
how do you guys whichever business it is, how do you people in the business that are putting it together behave around each other, especially in times where there's stress, where somebody's backing away and somebody feels like they're taking over, and maybe the person's backing away because somebody else is taking over and they're not aware of it. And so
Right.
how are you being the steamroller like we talked about last week with ideal team player? Are you being the steamroller or the bulldozer, and the other person is backing up because they don't know how to confront the bulldozer? Or are you actually just becoming passive and telling yourself from a humble place that you really don't have a whole lot to add, or it's working better without you, so you're stepping away, leaving everybody else to clean up a mess? And
Right.
so really kind of understanding that, and stepping back and go, okay, what is our vision?
Right.
What is this all about? How are we behaving together? What is our overall mission? What do we do? And then how are we going to succeed? And then again, then we move in. After we answer those questions, it's very easy to go, okay, who does what to help us
Right.
mission and work towards our vision?
Exactly, and by setting that foundation of your company's values and behavioral system, so to speak, it makes it so much easier to make decisions moving forward, and it decreases operational drag, because if you're the more defined you can be in who your company is and how you guys act, the easier it will be to define what is good and what is bad in your company. And people think it's universal, but it's not. You can have, there's different ways to skin the cat. All companies are different. You just have to figure out what works for you and your culture. And it's not as obvious as you might think it is. It's tough. It's a tough exercise to go through. Terry and Christine helped me a whole lot, navigating that. I mean, we did a retreat. It was like a 2-day retreat for like 8 hours each, going over this stuff. And it wasn't like BS time. It was legit. And it's not like a simple thing you just kind of scratch down. And again, this is also something that, as you grow and as you discover who you are and who you want your business to be, this is something you have to look back at and see, are these still our values? Should we update these? Or, are we living by these? That kind of thing. And
Right.
it makes
Yeah.
it much easier to navigate, interpersonal relations from that perspective of knowing where you're coming from versus just being in, la la land and, just like, yeah, that's good. That's bad. Just nobody knows. Everybody's,
Absolutely.
doing their own thing.
The idea that you don't actually create a $850,000 business, you just don't accidentally do that, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a little joke. But you can create quite a momentum by grinding it out. But at some point, if you don't step back and go, wait a minute, what framework have we built? And Christine and I use this idea of the bullet train, and you got to lay the track. And the different things that you're doing is, the one track is the vision, the other track is the mission, the ties that keep the tracks on the ground are the behaviors that you value, and then the way you do it, or the movement that you do it, is really, when you start looking at it, you're how do you succeed? This is how we move forward. And you're on the bullet train because you've got those 4 questions answered, and you don't derail then.
Right.
But what happens, and I see it over and over and over, that partnerships derail for the biggest reason and the biggest pitfall in these relationships. I got to say that word because that's what we called it at this point. But the biggest pitfall is that there is not a common connection in the business to the vision of what we're doing. And so one's working off of one vision, the other's working off of another vision, and we're not brought back to it to remind us why we're doing what we're doing every morning. Right. And the reality is every morning we have a new business, even if we have the same pipeline, but we have a new experience of the world. We have whatever's going on yesterday that has clouded today. And a lot of times we need that North Star of our vision to remember why it's important what we're doing. And I would bet money that the person that's backing up from that business either has one of 2 problems. One, they feel set aside, and so they've backed up. Or 2, they forgot their vision. Because whenever I see a company that has that happening with the leadership, and the communication starts splintering, so she doesn't know why the person is moving backwards, there's a communication problem, and it usually starts out from vision.
And I would add too, it may not, it stems from communication, and branching off of that, it may not even be a bad thing they're stepping back, because what you may be considering stepping back, maybe you guys are getting more busy. Maybe she has to, or he has to, focus on being in touch with clientele, tracking clientele. Maybe they're focused on different roles that you don't see being in operations, that you don't see as important, but they are. Again, there's 3 pillars in business: marketing, sales, fulfillment.
Absolutely.
Maybe the agreement at first, and again, like what Terry said, it stems off of communication. You've got to talk about this. But, maybe they're stepping back, not doing anything, but maybe they're stepping back from operations to handle more sales and marketing.
I
You
got to
know,
ask you, Kev, does that come from experience where you feel like people sometimes don't think you're doing much?
oh, never, Terry, never. I mean, and here's the reality too, right? And this is just the truth of the matter, right? Some roles require less time, right? Some roles have higher leverage and they require less time. Some of them are just grinding tasks, right? Like, for example, I can speak in the construction industry. You can only build a house so fast, right? Not saying that there's aren't ways to make it quicker, but that is something that's just going to straight up take time. Whereas something like sales, I mean, you can make multiple sales at once. Marketing, even more so. If you set up the right systems, you can just have people being attracted to you without you putting any time in. Doesn't mean you're not a worthy partner. It just means that I mean, it's a good thing. You've figured out higher leverage ways to get things done. Um, and again, that kind of goes back to what Terry said, the communication aspect, because somebody that's very operations focused may not understand that. And then, but on the flip side, maybe somebody that's in that kind of role, like a marketing sales kind of role, maybe they're underestimating, maybe there's too much in the pipeline and they're underestimating what operations can fulfill because it takes so much more time. So it's just important to have regular, meetings and regular communication on this stuff.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to add that sometimes it's not even that the person is feeling overworked compared to the other, but maybe they're just feeling unseen and unappreciated. And
That's a
so
great point
it
too.
might not be that they're, Alina might not be doing more than she was, but she's not feeling appreciated like she was because it's not being said. And so that's another communication thing is you got to remind people that you really see them and you appreciate what they're doing. And if they're not doing it, you also have to, on the other side of it, talk about feeling disappointed if it's not happening, and talk
Right.
about feeling, the scary word, betrayed, because we had a deal here and I feel like you're not doing what you said you were going to, and I feel betrayed. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. That just means I'm feeling that and I want to talk about
Right.
it. And the funny thing is, as soon as we talk about it and get it out in the air, it kind of floats away. But if we're not talking about it, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And so we got to talk about the emotions that we're experiencing. And from this question that Alina is asking, there's a lot of emotion in it. I would bet that she's feeling disconnected. I bet that she's feeling doubtful right now. I bet that she's feeling powerless a little bit from not knowing how to approach the situation. And she might be missing her partner. And it might not be because her partner is not actually there doing things. They might not be talking the way they need to. And so we really want to think about that. And this is the gold of communication, is to be able to identify the emotion that you're experiencing rather than putting it into, okay, this is the problem and they're wrong for it. And how do I make them right? Or how do I, the right, wrong thing? It's like, wait a minute, just talk about how you're feeling about that. And
Right.
then what can you say to them to let them know how you're feeling without attacking or without feeling like a victim? And when we can do that, we can actually have those adult conversations that really get us on the bullet train towards the success you're looking for.
Well said.
Thank you.
um, yeah. So I think to just kind of sum it up with Elena, I don't know, we've been calling her two different names. I apologize. But I think to sum it up, you really want to communicate with your partner, figure out how they're feeling, and just readdress the responsibilities. Think
Absolutely.
marketing, sales, fulfillment. Think about how those responsibilities should be divided and what those look like. And I think that should help at least ease some of the tensions.
And the action items I would suggest are even before, and I talk a lot about the three needs of a business, right? We have three needs as a human being: air, food, water. We have three needs as a business: leads, sales, fulfillment. But before we get to those needs, we also have to understand where we are with our vision, because, the partner might have a different vision. And if you're
That's
not
true.
clear on the vision, it doesn't matter how we divvy up the pie. If the vision's different,
Right.
okay, you do this and I do this. Well, my vision is to move to Africa and be a missionary.
So maybe, and that's a great point. Maybe you shouldn't be partners. That may be what ends up happening, and that's
Sure.
okay if that's the case.
But communication around, hey, this is what our vision was. Has it changed? What has changed? What's going on? Shoot, the person that has been your friend and in business with you for decades might be having some kind of personal issue that they're either ashamed to talk about, that they're afraid to talk about, they're embarrassed to talk about. And so they're backing up out of fear or embarrassment rather than because they don't care. And so compassion says, let's talk to them about what's going on from that compassionate, curious place, and then go, hey, this was our vision. Are you still on board? Are you still interested? If you are, let's revisit where we're at, because I'm feeling overworked. And I know you're not trying to make it happen. You're not trying to do anything that my head's telling me, but I want to talk about it so I don't end up with resentment. And that's what I say about that. And I think that really, when it's all said and done, I wrote a book chapter called "This is Business is Simple, but People are Complex." And so this that she's talking about is complexity of people relationships. And if you look at any business, leads, sales, fulfillment, that's simple. Okay. Where in the complexity is the issue? It's the interaction and the fear of what's happening and the story that we're creating. And so we got to step out of the story for a minute. And the only way to step out of story is identify the emotions, let them go, and then go after the data. And so that's what I suggest you do. Find out why, be curious, be compassionate, and in the most loving, caring way, confront it by asking what's going on. And you're going to see a whole lot of difference in the relationship and in the interaction when you go from that compassionate, curious place.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Where's my son? There it is. Boom. Hell yeah.
Bang.
I don't know if I can hell yeah myself, but I just did. So that's what we got for today, I believe.
Yes.
And if you want to reach out, Generator Coaching Consulting, that's us, generatorcc.com. If you're looking for a very high-end place to be built in Rhode Island, that's him. And if you want to just hear from either of us, if you got marketing questions, he's really good at marketing. So reach out with your questions for that. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Peace out, guys.
Peace.